Hey guys, so I'm gonna be making one of the resin trays, epoxy resin. I'm gonna show you how I do it. This is one I made a week or two ago, and I used some old scrap yarn in there and set it in there to give it a cool little design. I'm going to do something similar today, but first what I'm going to do is run you through what you might need if you want to try doing some epoxy resin. Firstly, you can see my area here. I've set up with these silicone mats because epoxy resin is super sticky, and it can be very hard to get off of certain surfaces, but it comes off of silicone really easily, so having silicone mats when you're doing this is a very good idea. So I've laid out my mats here so that I don't cover my desk in epoxy resin. You'll also need a silicone mold. These are quite easy to get on Amazon. All of this is easy to get on Amazon, really. I have here stirring sticks. Now, some sets come with the disposable wooden lollipop stick stirring sticks, which are good, but if you like to be waste free, then these ones are silicone stirring sticks, and you can get a big pack of them, and they come in two different sizes. You get small ones and then the longer ones. These are very good. So yeah, also in some cases you might need some of these pipettes. They're used for measuring. You can measure out little bits, or they're used as well for getting the resin in smaller areas without creating a big mess on your resin piece. You can get a big pack of 50 of these or 100 on Amazon for a couple of pounds. These are disposable, because the problem is once the resin's in there, it's hard to wash it out and it clogs it up, and then they're no good afterwards. I have looked for fully silicone pipettes, but they don't seem to exist. All pipettes seem to be made of either disposable plastic or glass or something like that, so that's something I couldn't get around. So disposable ones for me, they are easier. You can get a range of different silicone measuring jugs and pouring jugs. I have a big set of these, but today I'm using this one. They're on Amazon too. Also, if you want to use scales to measure out your resin, that makes it a lot easier. So I have scales and I'm going to be using those. And then of course you'll need your actual resin. So this is quite a good brand. So you'll need the A and then B. So you've got your epoxy resin and then the epoxy resin hardener. And yeah, so basically you need equal parts of these two. It's a 1-to-1, so equal parts and it'll work. Then of course there are these things. This is a heat pad. This usually would be a reptile tank heat pad. You put it underneath a reptile tank to heat the reptile tank up. But these are actually perfect for curing resin. So one of these is a really good idea to have. It is on at the moment. It's warming up. It's nice and warm, toasty. And then, of course, a heat gun. Now this helps to, one, cure the resin faster, and two, remove any air bubbles from your resin, because hot air rises, heat rises, so you want to heat them air bubbles up and they'll rise up out of the resin. Also, resin does not like the cold. It's very sensitive to temperature. It hates the cold. If your resin gets too cold, or it is curing in a cold environment, you will get weird smoky sort of effects in your resin, which, if that's the effect you want, fair enough. But if you want a crystal clear resin, you need the heat gun, and you need to make sure you keep that resin warm. And also, one thing I forgot, gloves. Wear gloves, because you don't want to end up with resin all over your hands, because one, it's difficult to wash off, two, you will probably end up gluing yourself to items, because epoxy resin is basically a super strong glue. This is another little tip I have. This is what I use. This is an old metal cake tin, and basically what I do, because I have a cat, I can get this lid off. I put my mould in there, and I'll pour my resin in the mould, leave it there. I will then add the heat pad here, and then put that over, and then leave it overnight to cure. One, as I said, I have a cat, and this stops the cat getting to it, and stops cat hairs and, you know, stuff like that getting stuck in the resin. It also, I found, creates like a little oven. So if you put your heat pad in there and put this in there, it traps the heat in there, so it will help your resin cure. I found this works really well for these smaller pieces like this. Yeah, so it's a really good little tip. So yeah, it's pretty good. I'm going to move that out of the way. Right, so I think I've showed you everything you may need. So what I'm going to be doing is, I have all this yarn left over from this little neck pillow I made myself the other day. So instead of wasting the yarn, throwing it out, I'm going to use it like I did with this project. And what I'm going to do is, I'm probably going to do kind of like a coil effect, a swell, maybe, like just coil it around in there. Yeah, and I'm going to use completely clear resin. I'm not going to add any pigment, because I think this yarn is very colourful, and I think that's going to be enough colour, and I don't want to ruin the colour of this yarn. So yeah, I'm just going to do a clear resin. So to start with, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up the resin, and then I'm going to add a layer in to the bottom here, and then start to add my yarn. And as I go, I'm going to add more resin, and then more yarn, more resin, more yarn. And hopefully that should trap the yarn in place. Hopefully. So, right, I'm going to move that out of the way. Let's bring the scales. These are pretty good scales. They do a range of different type measurements, but for this you will need mils, so ml. I don't know if you can see that there, that might be a bit bright, that LCD screen, but yeah, you'll need mils. Right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit my silicone measuring jug on there, then I'm going to press that to make it all go back to 0. Right, now we're going to get A, and we're going to pour A into this jug. Now I don't have a specific measurement in mind. I know roughly I probably need around about 100 mils each, probably not even that. So I'm just gonna start pouring and see where we end up. So one of these liquids is slightly thicker than the other and slightly heavier than the other. So it may look like you have more of one liquid than the other. 60, 63, it's a bit more. Come on. I probably am going to do roughly about 100 actually of each liquid, just so that I know I have enough to fill that mould. I mean, because if I have excess left over, I can easily just put it in one of the necklace pendant moulds and make a necklace pendant so that I don't waste any of the resin. $92. 95. Come on. 97. 99, 100. There we go. Perfect. So we've got 100 of the A. Right, now we leave that sat on the scales, and we press this button again to turn it back to 0. Now we pour 100 of B, of the hardener. Now this resin has 40 minutes work time, so once you've poured it and mixed it, you've got 40 minutes to put it in your mould, add your pigments, your fillers, do whatever you want with it before it starts to harden. Once it starts hardening, you can't really work with it. So we need 100 of B. 58, 59, 60. I'm slowly pouring because I don't want to end up with too much. 70. 80. $90. 94, 95, 97, 98, 99, dribble more, 100. There we go, perfect. And you might see I haven't put my gloves on yet. I totally forgot the gloves. Luckily I didn't spill any of this. Right, we've finished with the scales now. So I'm going to switch them off and put them out of the way over there. Right, so we've got our resin in there. We got to mix that, but I'm going to put my gloves on quickly because I totally forgot about the gloves. That would have been disastrous if I had spilt the resin. Be sticking myself to my own desk. That wouldn't be good. These gloves, I hate these ones. They are awful. They're the cellophane kind of gloves. I would prefer rubber gloves. But rubber gloves lately have been a little tricky to get hold of. And they're very expensive at the moment, rubber gloves. I think it's all due to the pandemic and everything like that. So yeah. I know what's going to happen with these gloves. Halfway through this project, I'm going to get annoyed with them and I'm probably going to take them off. That's usually what happens. But yeah, right, so we get our stirring stick and we stir our resin, the A and B together. You will probably start to see air bubbles, but don't worry if you start to get too many air bubbles in it. Just sit this whole thing on your heat pad for a couple of minutes, and the air bubbles will slowly rise out, and also the heat will start the curing process slowly of the resin, but it won't be so fast, so you'll still have time to work with it. Also I should mention, if you're stirring the resin, do a they say a slow even stir. Do not whisk it, because whisking it you will add a ton of air bubbles. So don't whisk it, just stir slowly. That's looking good. It might look a little bit cloudy at the moment. Mine's looking a tiny bit cloudy maybe. Oh, the noise of these gloves as well is annoying. Right, so I've stirred that pretty well. There are a few air bubbles in it, so I'm going to get my heat pad and I'm going to just sit it on there for a moment. Most of these air bubbles I can remove in a minute with my heat gun once I've put the resin in the mould. Right, so what I'm going to do is just remove the air bubbles with the heat gun in a minute. That'll be faster. So I've got my mixed resin here. Let's get our mould. Now I want to put some of this in the bottom here, bent pipette. Now we can use a pipette to do this, or we can pour. I'm thinking pouring it might be better, quicker and easier, but be very careful not to spill it over yourself. There we go, I've got it where I need it. Right, and we are ready to put in the yarn. Now I'm using this stick here so I can poke the yarn into the mould. Right, so firstly though I should heat gun this because I want to get the air bubbles out. So excuse the noise of this heat gun for the moment. I might be able to try and edit the noise out, I don't know, but do excuse the noise. Right, there we go. Do be very careful with heat guns. They do get very hot, and do not touch the end there, the nozzle, because you will burn yourself. I found this out the hard way because I am terribly clumsy. Right, so we're now going to put the yarn in. So I'm going to start this end here, and I'm going to poke that yarn down into that resin, into the gap. This will create a rim. This is the rim of the tray. So sort of this edge bit here. So yeah, I'm going to slowly sort of push that down into there. There we go, it's working really well. Hopefully I'm not getting my hands in the way too much and you can see what I'm doing. I'm terrible trying to work with stuff like this on camera. I always get my hands in the way. This is a great way of using up offcuts of yarn that usually would be too short to use to knit anything else, and would usually get thrown in the bin. I don't like to do that because some of the yarns are really cool colours, and it just seems a waste. I don't like to waste things too much. So yeah, I'd rather, you know, just use them in other art projects. Right, so we've met the beginning. So I'm going to carry on coiling, but I'm going to try and untangle this yarn a little first. Bring that. Would help if I didn't drop the yarn. Right. Yeah. Get this yarn going where I need it to go. Right. So now I'm going to bring it up this way. There we go. And with this stick, it's easy to push and direct the yarn and your fillers and stuff where you want them. Again, I need to sort this yarn out. This is the tricky bit of using yarn in a resin project. It just, like, yarn likes to get tangled. It's terrible. Right, I think I've got enough there. Once I get this coiled round, I'll be pouring more resin on the top to cover this yarn. So then it'll be trapped in resin forever. And it should create quite a nice effect as well. I'm quite happy with this so far. It's looking really, really good. It's kind of like a rainbow tie-dye effect on this yarn. I really like it. We're getting there. You come round this way. Right, I need to do a bit of untangling again. I might need to pour some more resin in the middle there in a minute, because there's no resin on this part of the mould yet. But that's okay, I can add some in a moment. Which, if I do that quickly now, actually, there we go. Now it's fully. It's looking good. Right, I'm going to move this yarn to where I need it again. Oh dear, and I think I do have a bit of resin on my desk. So I'm going to quickly wipe that up, because I don't want that curing on my desk, because then I will never ever get it off. And I believe that got on there because I ended up dropping the yarn into the resin. So yeah, this is really tricky trying to use the yarn. You've got to be very careful. Make sure it's all stuck down into that yarn, into that resin. There we go. So once we've got this resin in there, we're going to need to pour, once we got the yarn in the resin, rather, in here, we're going to need to pour more resin over the top, then blast it again with the heat gun. But we need to be careful that the yarn, there's no yarn poking out of the resin. We need to make sure that all the yarn is completely covered and concealed in that resin before we heat gun it, because the yarn is flammable. So you don't want burnt, singed yarn in there, because that will ruin the look of it, unless that's the look you're going for, the burnt, singed look, you know. So make sure your yarn is completely covered before you heat gun it. Again, we are getting there. It's looking really cool. I might need to cut this yarn in a moment, because it may be too long, but that's okay. I left it too long because I wasn't sure how much I was going to need, so leaving it long was the better option. We are nearly done. Just want to make sure I've got it all in the correct position. I'm liking this. I'm really happy with this so far. I'm just gonna maneuver some of this yarn to create space for more yarn. Round a couple more times, I think. Look at that. This can be very fiddly and time consuming, as you can probably see. Right. One more time. And we are nearly done. Yep, so I will need to cut the yarn here. I need to grab my cutters. Bear with me for 2 seconds. I know I have them in a baggie here somewhere. Aha! My cutters. I'm going to cut that about there. There we go, that's what's left. I'm probably going to need to clean those snippers in a minute. There we go, look at that. Amazing. Right, so now we're going to pour more of this resin on the top here, and I'm going to slowly pour. I'm going to make sure I fill in all them gaps. Make sure I cover this whole entire thing. Trying to keep an eye on the level in this mould as well, so I don't want to over pour and it spill out everywhere. That would be terrible. There we go. Right, now I'm just gonna use this stick again to push down any of the yarn that's floated upwards, to make sure there is none poking out of the top, and make sure the yarn is completely soaked in resin. And we can manoeuvre the yarn a little bit more as well, make sure we've got it where we want it. This looks super cool. So yeah, I've squashed that all down a bit. I'm going to pour a little bit more on top just to make sure that it is fully covered. There we go, I am happy with that. Some more has floated to the top. It may float to the top slightly, a few bits of yarn, but don't worry too much, just push them back down and they should stay where you put them. Right, now what I'm going to do is I am going to use the heat gun again, and again excuse the noise. Yeah, so here we go. Right, I am very happy with that. And yeah, so now I'm going to leave this overnight to cure. So it is the next morning, and the resin piece has been in the makeshift oven all night on the heat pad curing. So I'm going to get to that in a moment. But first I want to show you this. There was a little bit of, I don't know if you can see in there, a little bit of resin left in the bottom. And basically, if you've got resin left in the bottom of your silicone jugs, just wait for it to set and cure and dry, and then just peel it out. It's the easiest way to clean it. You can clean these and the silicone molds as well with just dish soap and water. Make sure you fully rinse them thoroughly and dry them thoroughly before you use them to do any resin things, because getting liquid in your resin can ruin it. Getting any other substance in your resin like the soap can ruin it as well. So yeah, be careful when you wash them, make sure you rinse them thoroughly. So yeah, let's just get to this and see what we have. I'll move that. Oh, it's nice and warm. Yep, it's cured. There are a few air bubbles on there, which is a little bit disappointing, but I'm not too worried about that because that is the bottom of the tray. And what I'm going to do now is I'll just burst these air bubbles and then maybe later give it a bit of a sand and a polish on the bottom there. So that's not too much trouble, but we want to see what the top of the piece looks like, so we're gonna unmold it now. I didn't use mold release spray because I do not have any currently, so this might take a minute to get out of the mold, so bear with me please. There we go. The mold is now empty. We don't need that now. Wow. Look at that. That is cool. That is really cool. I like that effect. The yarn was a bit lighter when I put it in, but I suppose where it's got wet because of the resin, the liquid resin, and the liquid resin soaked into it, it's made the yarn darker, but still it looks really good. I really like that effect. I'm happy with that. And as I said, the bottom here needs the air bubbles popping, which I will do now, and a bit of sanding. It is a bit uneven, so I'm going to grab a needle or something sharp to burst these air bubbles. Let's see where I've got needles somewhere. There we go. So bursting air bubbles. Right, so we've got a nice big one there. There we go. That one's done. Nice big one there. This is actually quite satisfying. bursting air bubbles in the resin on there. I think as well with the yarn, the air was probably trapped inside the yarn. Also, I didn't check on it last night. I just left it on the heat pad to do its thing. I probably should have checked on it and made sure I popped these air bubbles while the resin was still wet. But I got into watching movies and totally forgot about it. So that was probably my bad. So yeah, but then I've only been doing resin art for a couple of weeks. I've been trying out some new hobbies, arts and crafts hobbies and stuff. So I'm still learning most of this. But I'm enjoying doing it, so. And I think I've got all the air bubbles. Oh, there's a little one there. Yep. And one there. So yeah, I've got all those those air bubbles. So now I just need to sand to the bottom of this and polish it. And then this will be a perfect tray. I'm not going to sand it on camera because I know the sound of sandpaper is awful. I hate using sandpaper because of that reason. So I try to avoid using sandpaper where possible because of my sensory issues. I get sensory overload and stuff like that, and certain noises really do cause an issue with that. So I'm not going to sand this on camera specifically because I know I have a few people with sensory issues like mine who watch my videos, and I don't want to cause any issues there for them. So yeah, all in all, I am pleased with this so far. Just a little bit of sanding and polishing on the bottom and it will be done. But I will post the pictures of the finished sanding and polishing on the Chronically Suki Facebook page and maybe on Instagram as well. But yeah, but I'm gonna chuck a photo up now here of the other trays I made, the other epoxy resin trays I have made, and the sorts of things you can use them for. So you can use them as a kind of coaster, put your tea mug on there with your bickies, really useful. You can use them for putting knickknacks in, such as you could probably see there, my fidget toys. I put them in one. I use one while I'm doing arts and crafts and doing knitting and stuff like that to put all my knitting tools and supplies on so they don't roll away from me. So yeah, they're really handy little trays. And you can decorate them how you want, put whatever filler or pigment or whatever you want in there. Yeah. You could probably even use these as like soap dishes maybe, and things like that. But yeah, anyway, I'm gabbing on a bit too much. I think we are done. I'm just going to set this up here as an end screen kind of, I don't know. if it will stand up. There we go. So that is my resin, epoxy resin tray. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you all later. Bye bye.